They were flawless on film, and hiding bodies the world was never meant to see. Behind the shimmering gowns and silver screen smiles, old Hollywood's brightest stars carried physical scars, deformities, and disabilities that studios buried deeper than scandal. In an industry obsessed with perfection, their pain was hidden in plain sight. This is the untold story of beauty, illusion, and the bodies that didn't fit the frame. James Stewart, the limp that followed him home. He walked like a man carrying the weight of two wars, one on the battlefield and one in his bones. To the world, James Stewart was the all-American hero, tall, gentle-voiced, a man who stood for decency even in the darkest of roles. But what the cameras rarely captured was the subtle irregularity in his stride, a quiet, permanent limp that whispered through every performance. It wasn't the kind of injury that demanded attention. It didn't scream, it murmured. And Stewart, ever the master of restraint, learned to fold it into his characters like a hidden signature. The truth was, the limp wasn't born in Hollywood. It came from childhood. A fall, innocuous at the time, left a lasting mark on his spine. But he would later carry it through war-torn Europe, flying combat missions in World War II, where pain became a quiet companion in the cockpit. By the time he returned to Hollywood, decorated and changed, the limp had deepened, no longer just physical but symbolic. He moved like a man who had seen too much, lost more than he admitted, and returned with part of himself left overseas. Directors worked around it, camera angles softened it, and audiences never questioned it. But for those who looked closely, the truth was always there, tucked between the footsteps of a legend who never stopped walking, even when it hurt. Claudette Colbert, the left side of perfection. She ruled the frame like a queen, as long as the camera never dared to cross to her right. Claudette Colbert was elegance personified, sharp-witted, cool under pressure, and luminous in every role she touched. But what audiences never saw, what she never allowed them to see, was the side of her face she spent a lifetime hiding. It wasn't disfigurement in the clinical sense, but to her, the asymmetry of her right profile was a silent betrayal. A single flaw in an empire of poise. From the earliest days of her career, Colbert made a simple, unbreakable demand: shoot me from the left, only the left. Sets were redesigned. Blocking was reversed. Even co-stars learned to hit their marks according to the angle she required. It wasn't vanity, it was survival. In a town that devoured imperfections, she became her own sculptor, carving an image that fit within the brutal symmetry of 1930s glamour. No director challenged her. No cinematographer dared ignore her rule. And somehow the illusion held. Audiences fell in love with that single, perfect side, never knowing the war she waged in mirror after every shoot. Every frame became a battle between what the world expected and what she believed she had to hide. In an industry of masks, hers was seamless. Not painted on, but built day by day, out of angles, light, and sheer will. Montgomery Clift, the man with two faces. He didn't die in that crash, but something else did. Montgomery Clift wasn't just a movie star. He was a force, the kind of screen presence that didn't need to speak to be heard. Before Marlon Brando and James Dean ever snarled their way into iconography, Clift was already redefining masculinity, all aching eyes and velvet restraint. But then came the curve, the night, the silence, and the scream of metal folding in on itself. The car hit a telephone pole just outside Elizabeth Taylor's house. She was the first to reach him. His face was blood, shattered teeth, and swelling flesh. The left side, the side that had once launched 1,000 sighs, was unrecognizable. They called it a miracle that he survived. Hollywood didn't see it that way. The reconstruction was meticulous, but it couldn't bring back what had been lost. His smile became uneven. Nerves refused to heal. The symmetry that the camera once adored now betrayed him in close-up. But Clift didn't disappear. He returned. And the performances that followed, Judgment at Nuremberg, The Misfits, burned with something raw. A beauty unvarnished. A soul unraveling in plain view. He was no longer the golden boy. He was something else, something tragic and too human. Half man, half shadow. A living split screen between what Hollywood wanted and what life had delivered. In every scene after the crash, you can feel it, the quiet war behind his eyes. He never stopped acting. He just stopped pretending. Bela Lugosi, the body that wouldn't rest. He played the undead, but it was his body that refused to sleep. Bela Lugosi will forever be remembered by a single word spoken in a slow, velvet drawl: Dracula. That was the role that made him, and it was the role that chained him. To the world, he was a creature of the night, immortal and hypnotic. But behind the cape and the arched brows, Lugosi was a man at war with his own skeleton. He lived with a body that betrayed him, searing pain in his spine, his legs, his every movement. Long before Hollywood knew what to make of pain behind the performance, Lugosi masked his torment with poise and precision. Each scene was choreographed not just for drama, but to hide the truth, that standing, walking, even breathing without effort had become near impossible. It was sciatica, they said, a cruel inflammation that left nerves burning like wire. But Lugosi treated it like an uninvited co-star, always just off camera. Between takes, he would retreat to silence, sometimes unable to rise from a chair. Directors learned to shoot around his stiffness. His characters became slower, more deliberate. What the audience read as menace was, in truth, physical endurance. And still he worked. Even as his roles shrank and the shadows grew longer, Lugosi returned to the stage and screen, carrying pain like a secret beneath his tailored costumes. The world saw a monster who would never die. The man beneath him was already disappearing. Jean Arthur, the woman who hid in the light. She had a voice like wind chimes and a face that feared the lens. Jean Arthur was one of the great enigmas of classic Hollywood. On screen, she radiated charm, warm, whip-smart, effortlessly lovable. Directors praised her timing, audiences adored her presence, and yet, when the lights dimmed, she vanished. Not metaphorically, literally. She would disappear from sets, dodge publicity, retreat from photographs. She was a star who wanted everything, except to be seen. The reason, though never shouted, lived just beneath the surface. Her face, or rather, what she believed it betrayed. Acne scars, uneven angles, and a profile she loathed, these were the obsessions that haunted her. She couldn't see what the world saw. Every camera became a threat. Every still photo a confrontation. Lighting crews were instructed to blur her softly, always in flattering glow. Cinematographers bent reality to her will, and yet it was never enough. Even at the peak of her fame, she avoided red carpets, skipped award shows, and bolted from interviews like a fugitive of fame. It wasn't modesty. It was terror. She struggled with mirrors the way others struggle with aging, except she never waited for time to turn cruel. Jean fought her reflection even in her youth, in her prime. Stardom didn't save her from insecurity, it magnified it. And while the public saw a golden era goddess, she saw a flaw she couldn't forgive. Jean Arthur didn't just act, she hid in plain sight. And somehow, in the hiding, she became unforgettable. Harold Lloyd, the hand that wasn't there. He dangled from clocks. He ran across rooftops. He made the world laugh with only 8 fingers. Harold Lloyd was the face of fearless comedy, a silent-era legend who turned danger into spectacle. While his contemporaries, Chaplin and Keaton, leaned into sentiment or deadpan brilliance, Lloyd was pure adrenaline, the boy next door chasing dreams across skyscraper ledges and racing against gravity itself. But what his audience never knew was that the man clinging to that clock face in Safety Last was doing it with a prosthetic hand. It happened early in his career during a photo shoot with what was thought to be a prop bomb. It exploded. The blast tore through his right hand, taking his thumb and index finger with it. His eyesight was nearly lost, too. For most, the injury would have ended everything. But Lloyd wasn't most. He healed in secret, returned to the set, and kept climbing, literally and figuratively. He wore a specially crafted glove, fitted with prosthetic fingers, colored to match his skin. It was nearly seamless. He trained himself to perform stunts with limited grip, never asking for sympathy, never breaking the illusion. And so the world watched him cheat death over and over, never knowing how close he'd already come. The silent star had a secret, one he kept clenched in a gloved fist. He didn't just risk his body for the shot. He kept going after the cameras had already taken a piece of him. Veronica Lake, the eye behind the curtain. She was a vision in shadows, one eye hidden, the other watching everything slip away. Veronica Lake didn't just appear on screen. She glided into the frame like a secret. Her hair fell like a curtain over one eye, seductive and mysterious, launching 1,000 imitations and cementing her as the archetype of the noir femme fatale. But what the audience saw as style was, in truth, a shield, a way to obscure what she didn't want them to see. The hairstyle wasn't born from fashion, it was necessity. Lake suffered from a mild facial asymmetry that she never spoke about openly, but quietly resented. The right side of her face appeared slightly off balance to her, something most would never notice, but in the brutal world of close-ups and contracts, she noticed it every single day. The The hairstyle became her armor. One eye hidden, one exposed, always in control of what the world was allowed to witness. Later in life, it got worse. A series of injuries and illnesses left her partially blind in one eye, and though her fame had already faded by then, the cruel symmetry of it all was impossible to ignore. The eye she had once hidden was now the one she could no longer fully use. She was never just a hairstyle or a silhouette in satin. She was a woman carefully managing the spotlight, afraid that if it turned just a little too far, it would expose something she could never reclaim. Peter Lorre, the face that trapped him. He had the kind of face you don't forget, and the kind that never let him go. Peter Lorre arrived in Hollywood with a voice like a whisper through a locked door and eyes that seemed permanently widened by some private horror. He was unforgettable, not for leading man looks, but for something stranger. Something the studios saw as perfect for villains, lunatics, and haunted souls. His image stuck, and that image, in time, stuck him. What few knew was that Lorre's unsettling appearance wasn't crafted, it was chronic. He suffered from Graves' disease, a thyroid condition that altered his metabolism and caused a condition called exophthalmos, the bulging of the eyes. His stare, that signature wide-eyed intensity that directors adored, came not from performance, but from disease. It affected his energy, his weight, even his voice. The roles came easily. Too easily. He was cast as murderers, madmen, spies, never the romantic, never the hero. The condition shaped his career before he had a chance to choose it. The world looked at him and saw something eerie. Off. Unwell. Hollywood turned his illness into a brand, and Lorre, ever the professional, played the part, until the part began to play him. Behind the scenes, he was funny, warm, even gentle. But the world never got that version. They got the mask, stretched eyes, twitching nerves, and a body slowly burning itself out from inside. Peter Lorre didn't just look trapped in his own skin. In many ways, he was Gloria Swanson, the smile that wasn't hers. She stared down the camera like it owed her something, and smiled with teeth that weren't there. Gloria Swanson wasn't just a star. She was the star, the shimmering centerpiece of silent film's most decadent era. With arched brows, sculpted features, and a gaze that could freeze or seduce, she was what every actress dreamed of being, and what every man was told to desire. She played queens, sirens, goddesses, and carried herself as such. But behind the grandeur, there was a quiet, daily deception, one she perfected as obsessively as any role. Her smile was borrowed. By the time Swanson reached the height of her fame, she had already lost several of her natural teeth, worn away by illness and poor dental care in her early years, not uncommon in an era before dentistry caught up with celebrity. But unlike others, Swanson made a choice to never let the world know. She wore partial dentures, crafted with the same precision as her gowns, her lighting, her close-ups. Her public persona was a sculpture, nothing out of place, nothing allowed to age. The secret was guarded with the ferocity of royalty. Assistants knew never to speak of it. Photographers were directed to shoot at angles that caught the light, but never the truth. Even into her later years, long after her silent fame had faded, she remained meticulous, terrified that a glimpse behind the mask would shatter the myth. And Gloria Swanson was the myth. She just happened to build it with pieces no one was ever meant to see. John Barrymore, the hands of a king, twisted by time. He moved like a prince on stage, even as his hands began to curl like dead leaves. John Barrymore wasn't just an actor, he was the actor, often referred to as the Great Profile, a man whose very face was art, whose lineage stretched back to the roots of American theater. His voice could shatter silence. His presence filled rooms before he even spoke. But beneath the regal bearing and poetic diction was a body at war with itself, one that bore the quiet marks of rheumatoid arthritis and a history of physical damage hidden beneath elegance. His fingers, once nimble and expressive, slowly twisted with time, curled and gnarled like branches weathered by too many winters. In close-ups, he learned to tuck them, hide them behind props, use dramatic gestures that masked the stiffness. His famous nose, once straight and strong, had been broken multiple times, giving it a subtle crook that directors either softened with lighting or embraced as character. He bore it with theatrical pride, but it was a reminder of a body slowly breaking down. The tragedy wasn't that the deformities showed, it was that they didn't. Because Barrymore insisted on delivering perfection long after his body could no longer provide it. He leaned into the myth, reciting Shakespeare while his hands trembled off stage. His voice never failed him, but the rest did. John Barrymore died a legend. But like any great monument, the cracks were there all along. You just had to look closely. They were legends, not because they were perfect, but because they persevered despite the cracks in their reflection. In a time when the camera saw only what it was told to see, these stars carried their physical burdens quietly, often painfully, behind the curtain of glamour. They didn't ask for sympathy. They asked only to be remembered for their work, and they are. But beneath the glittering surfaces and immortal performances lived very human bodies, aching, broken, stitched together by courage and silence. Old Hollywood demanded illusion. These actors gave it everything, even the parts of themselves they could never get back. And in doing so, they carved out something more enduring than image, legacy. Not flawless, not untouchable, but deeply, beautifully human. If this video gave you a new perspective on these iconic stars, we invite you to join the conversation. Leave a comment and let us know which story resonated with you most, or share one we may have missed. If you found meaning in these hidden histories, please consider liking the video, subscribing for more untold stories from Hollywood's golden age, and sharing it with others who appreciate the people behind the performance. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones lived just outside the spotlight.